What's up, everyone, and welcome to Talking EU. I've been loving having these interviews here, and my special guest is Brennan here, our Quinlan Vos, if you follow him on Twitter. And so I'm happy to have another Talking EU as well. And I see people are waiting in the chat here. And what Talking EU is, for those who are coming in brand new to the show here, is I try to do one or two interviews a month with people who um, really got into the expanded universe. And sometimes it's even starting expanded universe, getting to know why and how and their journey through this. So it's all about them. It's not about me. However, I may share some things because, sometimes we get into the conversation and you can't help it. Yeah. So how are you doing, Brennan?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And look at his shirt. Look at that. Stand up. Like, show them the shirt. Like, that's amazing art right there. Look at that. I'm so happy that, and he has a case too. And it's like, oh my God, look at that. It's amazing to see your own artwork out there like that. That's pretty cool. I'm drinking out of my Asajj cup right now. So it's still relatively morning here in California. So, but again, thank you so much for your continued support and your knowledge. So tell a little bit about yourself before we fully get into this interview, if you want to share.
Where I started as a Star Wars fan.
Well, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. So basically, I'll just start the first question and you can spin off of that. What was your first Star Wars movie? Usually that's the segue into the EU.
It was about 2012, 2013. My dad
Yeah.
was a Star Wars fan, so he wanted to show me the films. So me
Mhm.
and my little brother and him and my mom started watching the films. We started with A New Hope,
Okay.
or as it was originally called Star Wars, because he liked the original trilogy more than the prequels. So we
Hmm.
watched through the original trilogy. Then we did the prequel trilogy, which I enjoy both trilogies, but we watched the original trilogy, then the prequel trilogy, and then I watched a little bit of TCW when I was younger as well, and that was kind of my first couple of years getting into Star Wars.
Okay. Wow, you have some amazing parents, and because they formally introduced you to Star Wars the right way. And
Yeah,
a lot of people saying, well, especially now with some of the future creators, and this is not about Disney, Star Wars, whatever, but I'm just going to go ahead and just, restate what Favreau said is like, we're making these new lore for Disney for the future generation because they're not going to want to watch the OT. But you are
mm,
proof that that's how you introduce Star Wars.
yeah. It was. I instantly loved the original trilogy. I was younger, so I wasn't as concerned with special effects, anything like that. I was just there to watch a movie, and I really enjoyed them. Instantly, just like pulled me in, and I was instantly a fan.
Yeah. So with that, with the OT and stuff, what is your favorite OT movie and maybe your favorite OT character?
My favorite original trilogy movie is Return of the Jedi. It's the
Okay.
happy ending. I really enjoyed that film. I think it's the perfect ending to the trilogy. Of
Mhm.
course, I love the EU stories post Return of the Jedi even more, but it was a great ending for the time. And probably my favorite character from that. That's probably hard. Maybe Han Solo.
Okay. Han Solo. Yeah, he's usually the go-to guy because he's that scoundrel, that guy who, don't give a crap, and just lives his life kind of deal. And I'm just like putting it all in such a small package of his character and stuff. But then again, then overcomes odds, gets out of his selfishness, wins the
Yeah.
princess, I guess you can say. Another awesome arc that George Lucas shared in the OT. Yeah. So, um, let's see. So, what is your favorite PT movie then? Since we did the OT.
For a long time, it was Attack of the Clones, and for a
Okay.
little while, Attack of the Clones was actually my favorite Star Wars film overall. It has since
Uh-huh.
become Return of the Jedi, but
Okay.
I was always such a huge fan of Jedi, and so the Battle of Geonosis was mind blowing to see all of these Jedi activate their lightsabers. So the Battle of Geonosis alone just made
Hmm.
me absolutely love Attack of the Clones. Now, though, I might give an edge to Revenge of the Sith. I think it's overall a better movie.
Yeah. Okay. So you're teetering on those two. I know a few people who love Attack of the Clones as well. Yeah. So it's very interesting to hear the Attack of the Clones. So what made it your favorite from the beginning?
It was largely the Battle of Geonosis with
Okay.
seeing all the Jedi together. I just thought
Hmm.
that was really cool. There's other great moments like Jango Fett versus Obi-Wan is a really fun scene on Camino.
Uh-huh.
Um, the Battle of Geonosis is great. There's some good stuff. Then there's obviously the really slow part and the awful dialogue between Anakin and Padme that pulls
Yeah.
it down a bit. But that last battle, the Battle of Geonosis, was just so mind blowing that for a long time it was my favorite.
Okay. All right. That's pretty interesting. I love that. Sometimes, like me, I grew up seeing the PT come to fruition as a young adult, I guess you could say. And so it's interesting to see how the media casted it, how people followed the attitude of the media when you look back at the PT, and I'm talking about the PT, that there was a lot of like good story in there. I mean, the story itself was magnificent, I believe. Um, I think the Phantom Menace was a good segue to start off, or not segue,
Yeah,
the introduction to start off how Annie came to be, or Anakin came to be, how he was discovered, what was going on in the state of Star Wars during that time. So the Sith came back, all of that. George really shared his vision well. Yeah, there are some clunky dialogue in there. We all agree some things could have been done a little bit better, but he was really great at sharing his vision coming forth from the OT. Yes, he did change things that he really originally wanted, for the betterment of the story, whether people like it or not. That's the way how he felt. It was his way or the highway, basically.
yeah. George Lucas told the story he wanted to tell, and
Hmm.
I like parts of it.
Yeah.
Um, could it have been done better? I think we all agree that it could have been, but I love the prequels. I still think that George told the story that he wanted to tell, and I think it's a fine story for what it was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we wouldn't be here talking about Star Wars if it wasn't such a success. Like if the PT fell through and wasn't a success as it was, we wouldn't be here today. The EU wouldn't, probably, maybe would not, but the franchise itself isn't just about the movies.
Mm.
It's about also all the media that was created around the movies as well. So, but I still think if the PT wasn't as a success as it was, we probably wouldn't be talking here. You wouldn't have the Clone Wars multimedia project and the TCW. We wouldn't have any of that. Rather,
Yeah,
we were like, we could do without it. but but I digress from there for now. Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get into the expanded universe? What took you in that direction?
so I saw The Force Awakens in theaters, and I thought it was fine. I probably liked it a little bit the first time I saw it. Then I went to see The Last Jedi, and I was just like, oh no.
Hmm.
So I was at a Barnes and Noble shortly after seeing The Last Jedi,
Hmm.
and my grandmother, I saw a Star Wars book, and my grandmother bought it for me, and the book was Star Wars Scourge by
Hmm.
Jeff Grubb.
Okay.
It's set in the New Jedi Order and follows a Jedi who isn't the greatest Jedi there is. His name's Mander Zuma, and I read the story, but I was really confused by one main thing in it, because Luke's Jedi Order was shown in Scourge to have succeeded and to have become established. And I was thinking, but in Last Jedi, Luke fails. His Jedi Order burns. How
Wow.
can these two things be cohesive? So I looked up about it and found out that it was part of the old timeline. And
Hmm.
then I discovered Matt Wilkins' channel.
Hmm.
Um, and discovered that there's all these comics and video games and picture books and short stories, all that told one story. And that blew my mind. I was like, wait a minute, so it all is one story. I've never heard anything like that before. There's nothing like it that I knew of at the time. And since then, I've never found anything that's like the expanding universe in that way. And so I was watching through his videos, and then I went to my library, and they had all the Clone Wars, graphic novels, which collected the Republic comic series. So
Yes.
all of the Quinlan Vos stories were there. So I
Hmm.
instantly became a Quinlan Vos fan because I was reading through those comics.
Wow. Wow. What a interesting segue, because your curiosity of like, okay, so I see what Disney's doing, and then I go and look into New Jedi Order and the original lore, and they're completely different.
Yeah,
So that then clearly shows to me that you're like, I agree with the original lore,
yeah,
how Luke was set up versus this guy that just gave up on everybody. Like when you watch him in Return of the Jedi and even Empire Strikes Back, when he is wanting to go rush off from the vision he's seen of his friends, like he doesn't want to give up. He doesn't give up. He does, even if it's wrong in a sense, he doesn't want to give up. He doesn't want to give up on his friends. He wants to be in the action. He wants to protect, which is very different than what the Disney lore has given us. So that's a
yeah.
very interesting thing. So go ahead and say what you're going to say.
I think that part of it was they wanted to subvert expectations, but why
Right.
would they do that with the characters we loved? By
Hmm.
subverting our expectations in the way that they did, they completely ruined everything that had been previously established, in my opinion. Just
Hmm.
to make Luke the hero of it all
Yeah.
end up being a failure, it almost it does. It undermines everything that came before. So I vastly prefer the depiction of Luke Skywalker in the EU.
Yeah.
He's so cool in the expanded universe, and he's way more faithful in the expanded universe to the original trilogy than Disney's fake Luke will ever be.
Yeah, and I agree. What I my channel was first dedicated to just my family and pow dancing and stuff, but then I was like, after the Last Jedi, like that was the breaking point. Like the expanded universe being tossed to the side as insignificant to the lore, that was one thing, and then seeing how they ruined Luke and stuff, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and start talking about Star Wars and use my channel that way. So that's how this channel was birthed, I guess you can say. But we do have Tuscan Bob here. I'm going to have you answer this. He's like, question for your guest. Why is C3PO the absolute worst character in all of Star Wars?
I think this question already puts words into my mouth by making me explain why he's the worst character, even though if I don't agree with that. But I will attempt to answer this question. If you hate C3PO as much as it seems you do, Tuscan Bob, I suggest you read Tales the Storyteller, which is a story
Mhm.
set after Legacy 2, and it
Mhm.
features C3PO being blasted to smithereens. And it's
There
one
you
of the last stories in chronological order. So you can check that out. And I do not think he's the worst character. I actually think he's very interesting, especially in New Jedi Order, because in New Jedi Order he has some thoughts of self-preservation.
go. Uh-huh.
Because seeing all the droids get destroyed by the Yuuzhan Vong, there's a bit where he's looking at a starship and the sparks flying off of it, and he's watching the sparks be life and then fizzle out, and he's
Yeah.
reflecting on how short life is and wondering what will happen to him when he dies. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yes. So there you go, Tuscan Bob. Yes, and he is not a big C3PO fan. So so I expect that from him. So don't take to heart all of that. That's just him. That's Tuscan Bob being Tuscan Bob. So Phantom gets a lot of unnecessary hate. I agree. Let's see here. And as I'm giving you these questions, I'm also going through the chat, sharing what they're commenting on, and you have your friends here supporting as well. So people from your own YouTube community coming in, and that's a great thing because it crosses the channels here. We get to share the love of Star Wars through your eyes. So yeah. And then we have a super chat from Alex here. This is going to be a great watch when I'm off work. Thank you so much for your super chat and your support as well. So that was a great interview with him as well. So, and then I do have another super chat coming up here too. I was able to find all three books of the Thrawn trilogy at a local bookstore, which doesn't have the Legends banner. That's amazing. I'll be giving them to my nephew the next time he and the family visit from California. You're such a great uncle.
That's awesome.
Yes. And another super chat, $2. Give me my Sword of the Jedi trilogy. Damn it. Were you no, you were on there with Matt Wilkins when they reviewed the Sword of the Jedi, right?
I was not on that. They were
Yeah,
reviewing the
okay.
Sword of the Jedi fan fiction.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
fan fiction, right? Okay. Yeah, I knew it was a review of something of that nature. I only watched bits and pieces, but yeah, Sword of the Jedi, that would have been a great one to segue Jaina, Fal, and Ben into the coming years that lead up to Legacy. So
It would have been great for bridging the gap to Legacy. I heard that some of the story elements would have involved um, creating an ending for the Lost Tribe of the Sith to clear
mhm.
the way for the one Sith. So it was
Yeah,
a very necessary story that we never got.
correct. Yes, yes. And so, what is your favorite novel? If you could pick a favorite novel, it's such a huge, vast. I know, it's a big task to answer.
What I always say is New Jedi Order Star by Star by Troy Denning. That is the one where spoilers. Am I allowed to say spoilers?
Sure. Well, you don't even have to say spoilers. I mean, if
Okay.
people don't know, then maybe it'll spark them to want to read it. So,
That's the novel where this Han and Leia's youngest son, Anakin Solo, sacrifices himself, and
yeah.
it's I've read it 5 times, and every time it gets me, just
Hmm.
because of I think that's a testament to the EU. The characters to the EU you really cared about. You got upset about them perishing, and I really think it's a beautiful novel. And the reactions of the family to Anakin Solo's sacrifice is truly heartbreaking.
Hmm.
I think it's an excellent novel, but if I had to pick a second, New Jedi Order Traitor by
Okay.
Matthew Stover is also
Yes.
excellent character study of Jason Solo.
Yeah, and it doesn't have any of the big three. It's just like
Yeah,
very like I wouldn't say it was well, we could say it's Jason Solo oriented in a sense, but there's very minimum characters, but the storyline, the plot, the development just gives that book was well written. Another great one from Matthew. Another one.
one of my
And here
favorite parts of one of my favorite parts of Traitor is when Ganner Rysod, a Jedi who's been kind of an annoyance throughout New Jedi Order,
Mhm.
he's
Yeah.
worried about Jason and he hears rumors Jason's alive. So in the last like 2 or 3 chapters, he's going to rescue Jason, and he has a heroic last stand where he kills hundreds of Yuzon Vongs. He's having to climb over it's so visual. He's having to climb over the bodies of the Yuzon Vong he's killed, and he did so much to prove himself there that the Yuzon Vong revered him and feared him
Right.
afterwards, and that was his heroic last stand, and it's just such an excellent scene.
Yes. And then do you have a favorite comic?
My favorite comic is probably Republic because
Okay.
Quinlan Vos is in it.
Yeah, this
Um,
is the series that involve him.
yes,
Yeah.
and it was originally called Star Wars. It was started in 1999, but then
Okay.
when they got to I think the Clone Wars era, they switched the name to being called Republic. And it's an excellent comic series. Though I also really like Legacy. Legacy would be a close second.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And so with Legacy, what interests you about that? Like the huge different atmosphere that it created away from the original Star Wars stuff.
Definitely, I feel like it's faithful to the original trilogy, yet also being very different.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an excellent story, and I love the character of Cade Skywalker, and it really makes sense. It's called Legacy because Cade Skywalker isn't living up to his legacy.
Right.
That's how I always interpreted the title. It's called Legacy because it's set way in the future, but also Cade Skywalker is refusing to take the Skywalker family name and be a hero, and he wants to run away from it. But no matter what he does, he can't escape his legacy, and he ends up being a hero anyways. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really interesting story.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when I seen Legacy come out, that's something that sparked my interest too because I'd seen the time gap there, and I'm like, oh, okay, so they're gonna start bridging the gap, you know. And
Yeah,
and then I'm like, Kate Skywalker. And then you see his attitude, what happened, his attitude, how it switched after the purge from the one Sith, all of that. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm down for this. I'm down for a story that still honors, like you said, but then gives us a different perspective of like
oh yeah,
120 something odd years from his ancestors and stuff. And when seeing these descendants of the Skywalkers, whether it's Maricel or it's Bantha, or Cade or any one of them, and how the new Jedi Order evolved in its
yeah,
own rights. Because when we left Crucible, by the time Crucible happened, um, Luke is like, we're taking the order off of Coruscant. We're gonna now serve
yeah,
the galaxy as a whole, not just the Republic.
yeah.
and here we are. And then we've seen hints of Jaina saying maybe I'll make my another order a spinoff, or it fell, suggesting that.
Yeah,
So,
leading to the Imperial Knights. Yeah,
correct.
it would have
Yeah.
been so amazing to see the gaps filled in. We know we would have gotten Sword of the Jedi. We would have gotten a trilogy with the Anzadi as villains by Troy Denning. We would have gotten another 9-book series.
Mhm.
And I have to think there would have been more after that. That we're going to keep bridging the gap between Crucible and Legacy, and it's such a shame we didn't get it.
Right.
That gap not being filled is one of the main reasons I want the EU continued, because there's so much story there that we just never got, and it's really
Mhm.
frustrating.
Yeah. And then I don't know this anyway, so this is for you though. Was the Sword of the Jedi fan fiction written by Hand of Thrawn 45?
Yes, it was. I believe his name's Gregory Scott as well,
Okay.
and
I
he
heard Gregory
wrote
Scott,
several
but
fan fictions.
I didn't associate the two. So yeah. Okay. And the review was kind of rough because like I said, I caught portions of it. I didn't watch the whole review, but the review was kind of rough because towards the end, I guess the continuity was going all over the place. So with that,
Yeah, I, I wasn't able to make it past chapter 1 of the fan fiction. I just couldn't get into it. You know.
yeah, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, fan fiction is that, and sometimes people will take it in different directions, and then you kind of like get taken out of it because they start losing the continuity that it's supposed to uphold.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah. So what game, if you're a gamer, what is your favorite game?
Hmm. Oh, that's a tough question. I made a video about this a while ago. I think I said KOTOR 2, but I
Okay.
also really like The Force Unleashed.
Okay.
I think they're both excellent games. Then there's also Jedi Knight Jedi Academy, which it features oh goodness, Kyle Katarn's Padawan, who's in Cross Current and Riptide. What is his name? I can't recall it now.
Oh,
But
I know who you're talking about. I know. Damn it, I forgot his name too, but I know I know who you're talking about on that one. Yeah.
yeah, he's a terrific character as well in that, and that game is so fun. Especially this is a game set in the New Republic era towards New Jedi Order. Imagine how great it would have been to get games like in the Legacy era or in the New Jedi Order era. There was so much more potential for games towards that end of the timeline. Jaden Core,
Yeah.
yes.
I was like, I knew it started with the J, but I was like, I'm gonna get it wrong, so I'm not gonna try to attempt. But I always have someone in the chat like, here you go, Laura. This is what you meant, or this is the name, or whatever. So you guys are great in the chat. Thank you so much. Yeah. So yeah. So we kind of revealed who your favorite character is. So go ahead and name him again and say why you like him.
Quinlan Vos is a super interesting character because he starts when we first see him. He's a Jedi who has Alzheimer's. Essentially, he has complete memory loss. He doesn't remember who he is. So the entire first comic is him trying to remember who he is and remember what it was like to be a Jedi, which is super interesting. Then by the time you get to the Clone Wars, he's mostly sorted his issues out. He's a Jedi Master now, and then he's sent by the Council to be a double agent for the Separatists, and then the Separatists send him to be a double agent to the Republic. So he almost essentially becomes a quadruple agent in the course of the Clone Wars. And he
Mm-hmm.
walks the line between light and dark. And he has to
Right.
pretend he's going dark to be this agent for the Republic with the Separatists. But while he's doing that, he starts to actually start to cross the line. He has to be wondering how far he's willing to push himself to go. Is he willing to carry out this assassination to prove his allegiance? Will that hinder his connection to the light side? Will he go dark side? And then he slowly starts to go dark side over the course of the war. And then it's about which side will he end up. And it's such a
Mm-hmm.
compelling story. I just really think he's an interesting character.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's see here what else. Oh yeah, I do have a quiz. So everybody knows who's been in the chat for these Talking EU interviews that I do love to do fun quizzes. It's just something for shits and giggles, something that maybe, oh, I didn't know this about the character. Okay, I'm going to go back and look it up and check it out, because we all have our own level of knowledge, and there's always something that we may not, and he froze, look at that. We may not known of until we reread again. And even Matt Wilkins has stated that before. So hopefully we get him back there. He's frozen up. Look at that. He's in mid drink, unless I'm frozen. What's Brennan drinking? I don't know. Perfect freeze though. Look at that. So I do have a quiz question coming up here pretty soon as we can get him back here. And how are you guys doing in the chat? Thank you guys for tuning in and sitting in. And he dropped out. We'll bring him back in as soon as he hops back in. If you're catching this on the replay, please leave a comment, like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you want to become a member and support the channel, please become a member as well. And if you're currently in the chat here live, go and share out to the stream, hit the like button, and hopefully he comes back. Other than that, this has been a great interview. I totally respect our younger generations coming up in the lore, doing their research, getting deep into the lore as well. So give this young man some props. Corellian wine, Mandalorian ale, or calf? Who knows? Who knows? Let's see here. Brennan is drinking hut blood. Wow. Let's see here. Great chat. Yes, it is. Let's see. If you want to check out another Star Wars fan work, there's Fate Denied. It involves a young trainee named Viera Sarat. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it, who goes from that to apprentice to Jedi over the course of the narrative. Nice. Let's see here. And I turned 16 this Wednesday. Got a bunch of EU books. Well, happy birthday to you, sweet 16. Enjoy your EU books. Let us know what you're reading, where you're starting at. Fabe or Fabe or Fabe. Sorry. Jawa juice. You want a cup of Jawa juice? I almost sounded like that robot. Damn. Yes. So as soon as he comes back, let me check the Twitter because that's how we're communicating as well. Let's see here. Hopefully he didn't have to reboot. Let's see here. It's a power outage. Oh no. I just had a power outage. Oh boy. We might have to have a part 2 with him. Yeah, that sucks. That was a great impression of the waitress droid. I didn't mean to do that. Oh my God. I I heard it in my mind and it came out the mouth. That's crazy. That's crazy. Let's see here. Oh, he's back. There we go. We got him back. Wow.
There's a thunderstorm absolutely ravaging outside, and it completely cut power. Lost all power for a second. I apologize.
No, that's no problem. I like I said, I checked the Twitter. I let them know what's going on, and there we are. We have you back. So perfect timing. For now, I know. So you guys put it out there in the world. Let us stay connected until we're done here. Now this is gonna be very interesting, or we'll just have to do a part 2. Yeah, there we go. So I do have a quiz question for you. You may or may not know, and that's fine. When and where was Quinlan Vos born? So when, like the year, the standard year, and then his home.
I don't know the standard year, but he was born, I believe, on his home world, which would be Kifu, or there's a prison world as well called Kifex. I think he was born on Kifu, though.
Yes. He was born on Kifu, and because his family are basically what you call royalty.
Yeah.
So he was born into that clan where it puts a lot of responsibilities on him as a person of the Vos clan. It's 57 BBY.
57 BBY. Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. So first quiz question here. And then, so we're going to go on. How did the expanded universe influence you? So once you got into it, how did it influence you?
Well, something my friend said really resonated with me one time. He said that the expanded universe meant so much to him that when you say Star Wars, the first thing he thinks of is the EU and not Star Wars in general. And I really resonate with that. The EU has meant so much to me over time. and I've read it when I'm depressed, when I'm sad.
Hmm.
It's gotten me through harder times and stressful times in my young life so far. It's like a safety blanket almost that I know I'm gonna have a good time if I go and read some EU. It's gonna be a real comfort, and it means so much to me that when I think of Star Wars, I just think of the expanded universe first. I don't
Hmm.
even think of the movies first. The expanded universe just is Star Wars to me, and
Hmm.
it's so special. It's influenced me wanting to be a writer. Um, it's influenced many parts of my life. It's uh, inspired my creativity, sparked my imagination. It's just become like such a part of my life that I read it almost a daily basis and discuss it with people almost a daily basis. It's just like without the expanded universe, I don't know if I'd be a Star Wars fan or not. I think I'd like Star Wars, but the expanded universe was just so much more to me,
Hmm.
and it just means everything to me.
Okay. And that's that's what you could say about like my generation is, yeah, the movies were it, and but once you got involved with the character and you wanted to learn more, that's what pulled you in. Everybody almost has the same kind of story, but the experience and how they got in or where they got in, like game, comics, novel, a certain character. For me, it was Luke. I wanted to know if he was going to keep his oath to Yoda and continue teaching, and I wanted to know what happened. And that's what got me in, because I came in as very, very, very young with the OT, so kind of, sharing age here a bit. Um, but that the thing is like, okay, what happened with Leia? What happened with,
Yeah,
Han? Did they get together? Like, what happened after that? Because we were left with the suggestion that they did. So how did they? What happened? Did they have any kids? So that's the thing. And then Luke, did he carry things on? Did he ever get involved with anybody? What were the other bigger threats after this one? And yeah, so we all, like I said, we all have our own insertion points from the movies somehow. Some people come in just with the games, and I've talked
yeah,
to people about that just because they wanted to play a Star Wars game, like it was the next game that was coming out, and it got them interested. And so I love everybody's story and your story as well, knowing that this is something that you can turn to when you're facing something, or even if you're
yeah,
feeling good. And I think that's the point of what George was making, why he was making Star Wars. If you go back to his interviews, he wanted it to be something escapism for kids,
yeah.
for adults, everybody, to get yourself out of the norm and go into something, a whole different, completely different world. So, and you caught on to that and you're like, yes, this is something I can go into, take myself out of my head for a while
Yeah,
and enjoy myself.
exactly.
Yes. And so Dominic right here says, have you ever read the Boba Fett trilogy of books during the Clone Wars multimedia project? So this is for you, I'm guessing. I got them from a book order at my elementary school's library and didn't regret it.
The Boba Fett books set during the Clone Wars era, I see a lot of people don't like them, but I really enjoyed them. I
Hmm.
believe there's 6 overall, but I think they were collected into hardcovers, so there might be 3 hardcover volumes as well. But I believe it's 6 paperbacks that I have.
Hmm.
Third shows up in them from Clone Wars 2003 with Jendy Tartakovsky, which
Right.
was really cool to see.
Hmm.
Um, there's a whole story with Aura Singh and the banking clan, which was really cool.
Yes.
There's some really great moments in it. And yeah, I think it's a Anakin shows up in the last one and confronts Boba Fett, which is really cool. There's a lot of
Right.
great moments in those young readers novels. I think they're excellent.
Yeah. And then I like to like when Dirge was interviewed or brought in and stuff. And then later on we got to see how they defeated him, how
Yeah,
Anakin defeated him. And it took the basically shooting him into a sun, into a star to kill him.
yeah, because Dirge is a Jedi,
Right.
so his flesh like melds together. All he is essentially tissues, and the tissues pull back together. In Jendy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars 2003 micro series, Obi Wan goes like literally inside of Dirge
Hmm.
and blows him apart, and
Right.
he is able to come back together. So they do have to, in the Republic comics, just shoot him into a star so that the
Mhm.
flesh doesn't rematerialize. And even then, the Galaxy's MMO game had a mention that there was a character like Dirge that existed and was still alive. So there's a hint that maybe that was not Dirge's final resting place. Who knows?
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have a favorite unpublished story or novel? I know some of us will go and
Unpublished.
look at the unpublished stuff.
I think Lightsider is really cool. I
Okay.
think it's a pretty great story. Heart of the Jedi is cool as well. Um, Actually, a more obscure answer I could give is the Adventure Journals only went for 15 volumes, and then there
Mhm.
was 16, 17, 18 that weren't published. And in the 18th volume, there's a story set during the Tales of the Jedi era
Yeah.
that is really cool called Light and Shadow. And if you want to read Light and Shadow, it's on StarWarsTimeline.net. And my friend Marcel, the Revanchist, who's in the chat here right now, has an audio drama that he did, a reading of the story, and it's so good. It's a really great story.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, like like some of those unpublished stuff were either vetoed or something happened to where they just were put in the back burner, depending on what the circumstances were. Like Heart of the Jedi, and I read through it finally, and I could tell like some things that were like broke continuity. Like what the heck's going on here? So then you kind of
Yeah,
realize, okay, that's why it didn't wasn't put into publication, through the company because it didn't meet the qualifications that George set for the publishing. So, yeah, but it's still a great read because you can kind of see the concept they're going. And you're like, "Oh, wow, just imagine if this didn't break continuity or wasn't vetoed or whatever the circumstances, this would have been an awesome story to add
for
into."
sure.
Yes, for sure. And what is your favorite era in the Star Wars lore? So we have the dawn of the Jedi era, the pre Old Republic, PT era, which is the end of the Old Republic. Then you have the Dark Times that leads into the OT. So then you have the Classical era. Then you have the New Republic era, the New Jedi Order, and the Legacy era. So do you have a specific favorite era you like?
That's pretty tough because I like all of them. I've
Yeah.
read almost every comic and I've read all the novels, so I have an appreciation for almost every era. I just think there's so much that's good about each one. If I
Uh-huh.
had to pick one,
Okay.
I'd maybe go for New Jedi Order, just because that Yuzon Vong invasion is such an epic story.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. So what'd you like about the Yuzhan?
Yuzon Vong are so interesting because they're not just a typical dark side threat. In the Bantam era, even though I love the Bantam era, it was typically dark siders, or in some way linked to the dark side of the Force, which was involved in most of the stories. But
Mhm.
then with New Jedi Order, the writers had this vision for a species that exists completely outside of the Force,
Mhm.
and that's just so interesting. And they come from beyond the known galaxy, even though their origin is explored in source material a bit more, and they may actually be from a galaxy very close to the main Star Wars galaxy. But they're so interesting because they're mysterious and they're different, and it
Mhm.
makes them more menacing. And you know that they're serious because Chewbacca dies very early in the conflict, so you know they're a threat that needs to be taken seriously. So they're instantly just very captivating and they grab your attention.
Yeah, and I'm curious. So, what did you think about Chewbacca's death? That whole storyline and stuff. What was your impression about it? How did it make you feel?
It made me sad, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I understood why they did it. And one of the reasons I think is because the Bantam writers have said that they had a hard time writing Chewie. He doesn't speak basic, so you have to have him growling all the time, and that's a hard character to have around. So it makes sense why they would kill him off. And I think it's awesome for the story because then you
Mhm.
take this threat seriously.
Mhm.
Then there's a lot of weight and darkness to the rest of the war, and then you're like, no one's safe. It could be Leia or Luke or Han next, and
Yes.
you have this fear. And also, I think the death scene is actually written really well. People make
Mhm.
fun of it like, oh, haha, the EU dropped a moon on Chewbacca's head. The people who say that haven't read it. You have
Right.
to read it because it's an awesome scene. He puts his arms above his head and roars defiantly at the moon as it crashes down upon him. And the reason he was in that situation to begin with is he fulfilled his life debt to Han by
Mhm.
saving Han's son Anakin Solo. And so there's so much nuance there that I thought it was a really excellently written story.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's the thing. You're right that people haven't read it because, or maybe not even understand that life depth that he had to the Han Solo, which extended off to Leia and then
Yeah.
the kids. And after you get past that, and they go to Kashyyyk and they have the honorary, burial and stuff like that, it goes more into the life depth because now they're like putting their another family member is taking on the responsibility for Chewie because that's such a big deal to the Wookiees. And so that's the thing is like, and my point is like, people who don't understand the significance of Chewie's death and his defiance against something that he has no control over.
Yeah.
That's badass. He looked fear right into its eyes
Mm.
and says, "I'm, come get me.
Yeah.
You can break me, you can kill me, but you will never break my soul. You will never break who I am to these people, to myself, to my culture." And that's truly freeing. And when you look at it in a warrior aspect, warriors are just like that
Mm.
because they will like, you could break my body, you can kill me, but you won't break my soul,
Yeah.
break my spirit. You won't break the purpose and why I'm here. And so people who don't understand that, I'm like, please start looking into warrior culture. Warrior culture isn't just about war. It's about the moralities. It's about protection. It's about spirituality. There's so much that go into that brings up a warrior, especially when you look into Japanese, the samurai
Mm.
and stuff like that. And that's a lot, George pulled from and was inspired by
Yeah.
a lot of different cultures, and he put it into Star Wars and created something vastly uniquely different by all the influences he, had in front of him.
It really shows. I think part of warrior culture and part of Chewbacca is just like this unbreakable spirit. Is just this. There's just this, like you said, a defiance. He's facing death, but he's bigger than death itself almost. With how he just doesn't care about it. He's defiant of it. There's just this unbreakable spirit that's very. It's quite an emotional scene the way it's written. Chewbacca's death.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing. So like I decided to revisit the New Jedi Order timeline, and then I was also listening to the unabridged version online with some of the books that are published unabridged on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so whatever is not, published on YouTube unabridged, I'm picking up and reading. And right now I'm still making it through Star by Star, the
Mm.
unabridged Audible, because even reading it again, listening to it for the first time, and stuff, it's like I had to pause. I have to pause, especially when you get into Merker and and all that, and
Yeah.
this, the taking over and trying to kill the Voxen Queen and what leads up to that. Oh my God. And that's great writing in itself when you have to put down the book and like take a breath or two, even though you know the story already.
Yeah, and what's really heartbreaking about that for me is because you read Young Jedi Knights and they're kids, and they're having their fun little adventures, right? And then you get to Star by Star, and all of these kids who you knew are now fighting for their lives on this
Mhm.
mission, and they're watching each other die as they go through this, and it's a really grueling read, but it's really well written. I read Young Jedi Knights when I was 12 years old. That would have been
Mhm.
in like 2018,
Okay.
and then I read New Jedi Order when I was like 13. So I tell people this. I felt like I was the age of like Jason, Jaina, Lobaka, Tenel Raynar, the whole gang. I
Yeah.
felt like they were my friends. Then I read New Jedi Order, and I tell lots of people this. It was like watching my friends grow up and die. It was very traumatic almost, but it was a great story, and it was quite heartbreaking. I think parts of New Jedi Order, but again, the stakes to New Jedi Order are like higher than anything else in the EU because no character was safe. I think there's only one book that doesn't have a previously established character die in it in New Jedi Order. It's crazy.
Yes. And that is good writing because you don't want the same old, same old. Like you said earlier, you
Yeah,
don't want the same old villains, the Imperial remnant, or some kind of dark side force using Sith come through. You want something different that gives the heroes a bigger stake so they can grow and develop. Because this was
yeah,
also Luke's growing experience. He
yeah,
was very doubtful on which way he should go.
Yeah.
almost passive. And people are like, that's not Luke. I'm like, well, that's him trying to make sense of these new invaders, these new type of species that are coming in. Should they go this way? Should they act that way? Because he doesn't want his people to turn dark.
Yeah, and that's a fear that Luke had for many years. If you
Hmm.
read the Marvel comics, that just after Return of the Jedi, there's a lizard warrior. He's like this lizard species named Draco, and
Yeah.
he asks Luke to train him, and Luke refuses because he doesn't want another Vader to be on his conscience because
Hmm.
of him. And he's wrestling with that for many years. In New Jedi Order, he wrestles with that again. Are we going to go dark trying to defeat these enemies? At the same time, he's like, I want to make peace with them. And as he goes along, that truly becomes unattainable, and he's
Hmm.
slowly realizing that they have to make a stand over New Jedi Order, and he's like conflicted the whole time. I think probably the main factor that made him be like, "All right, we've got to fight," was 60%, I believe, of the New Jedi Order were killed a couple years into the war. So he
Hmm.
was watching all the people he was training be slaughtered, and so
Right.
he's like grappling with this decision even more. And it's I think Luke is written really well in NJO.
Yeah, I've heard some complaints. That's why, from people, and that's fair enough assessment because, they see Luke coming from Return of the Jedi, and then him still, he still had his fear, his doubts, because even in Thrawn trilogy, he was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to be right, perfect enough, or good enough to train my nephew, my niece, my sister to where George Sabayoth is like, if you come with me, you can learn more so you can better train, basically, in general.
Mm,
And so we see him, and then once we have the Jedi Academy, and he's teaching there, and he's already been tainted by the dark side, and then he still has that faltering sensibility, and then
mm,
Exar Kun basically puts him in a coma, but it tests his own students, his first generations of Jedi, and we see a lot of like struggle and and some groundbreaking stuff for the New Jedi Order within that trilogy as well. So
mm,
yeah. So as you go along within Luke's journey and the storyline after Return of the Jedi, you do see Luke. He wasn't perfect. His order wasn't perfect. He did have people fall to the dark side. He had the redeeming qualities, but then we learn that not everybody can be redeemed. Hence, Jason Solo.
yeah.
So, mm-hmm, yeah. And then, so tell me a little bit more because I know you were faltering on like between Jason and Quinlan Vos. So share with us a little bit about what you like about Jason Solo. And you're muted. There you go.
Um, yeah. In my last, in your last kind of interview time with Alex, Alex summarized a lot of the reasons why I like Jason Solo.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Solo is this character who I empathized with when I first read it because I'm an animal lover, and
Mm-hmm.
he was an animal lover. So I had an instant connection to Jason reading Young Jedi Knights,
Yeah.
and he's such a he's such a sympathetic and caring character in like Crystal Star or Young Jedi Knights or the Black Fleet Crisis or the Corellian trilogy. Whenever you see Jason, he's an empathetic, kind character. Even when he's like a toddler in the Jedi Academy trilogy, he's got this empathy to him and this sweetness. And then the new Jedi Order changes him. He watches his brother die. He watches his friends die. He gets tortured for months by Vergir mentally and physically by the embrace of pain. And then, after all of this trauma, he has this daughter, and he doesn't want her to go through any of the things he went through. So he is like, I've got to be in control. So he gets like Anakin, how Anakin wanted to control life and death. Jason wants to have control. He wants there to be a safe galaxy for his daughter and all the other daughters of the galaxy to grow up in. He wants to create a stable place where they won't have to go through what he went through. And so he's trying to do this. And he believes the only way to is to accumulate power. So he's like, I can get power through the dark side. But then he's arrogant because he went on this 5 year sojourn and he's learned all these force techniques. And he's like, I'm stronger than Luke. I'm stronger than my grandfather. I can use the dark side and not fall. I will not be corrupted. He thought he was above it, but he wasn't. He was a flawed individual. And in trying to accumulate this power for good means, he ends up slowly falling and losing himself. and it's so tragic to watch a character you love in Legacy of the Force just slowly losing themselves. There's bits where he yells at his daughter, who was the whole reason he went on this dark side excursion in the first place, for her. He was doing all this for her, and then he lashes out at her, and he's losing himself. He's losing his motives, and then at the end, you think he's redeemed himself because he warns Tenel Ka and his daughter to get them away from the moths that are trying to kill them. So I think there might be a little good in him. But then in Fate of the Jedi, Luke and Ben Skywalker communicate with his soul, and he has no regrets. He says he'd do what he did again if he had the chance because he believes he was right. He was this empathetic character who was hardened by war and then walked a path of light and dark, thinking the ends justified his means, and he was just this flawed individual in the end. And I think it's a really interesting character. Therefore, I think there's similarities too between Jason and Quinlan Vos.
Right. Yeah, you could see a little bit of Jason in a lot of these characters, and sometimes with the motives too, because like you said, you could see similarities with Quinlan Vos because he went in, to kind of like Luke did with Dark Empire to go in and into the source to try to defeat. Yeah. And then Jason, he decided to be the source so he can use it to make peace, which that's very passive and that doesn't justify the ends, really, the means to the ends, or whatever. And so go ahead and share a little bit of how you see the similarities between Quinlan and Jason. Just a little bit more, elaborate.
I see them both as people who wanted to do good, but then were willing to do anything to achieve that good. And in being willing to do anything for the good that you want to do,
right,
they both ended up losing who they were in the process and ended up becoming what they sought to destroy. They're both individuals who set out to do good, but they both lost themselves in the process by making poor decisions. So I think they're similar in that way. And Quinlan Vos was going into the Sith Order looking to kill the second Sith. The whole time he was looking, where's the second Sith? Gotta find the second Sith, and we can end the war, and we can have peace. That was his motives. And Jason Solo's motives were, if I can get to the top, I can keep and control everything, and it'll be safe, and there will be peace. So they both wanted to put an end to bloodshed, but they were willing to do anything, including kill, to accomplish that. And so they both were good intentioned, I believe, originally. But they both lost themselves as they were trying to accomplish their goals. So I see a similarity there.
Yeah, the only thing is that Quinlan ended up, surviving the attack of him on Kashyyyk. Yes. And then as he promised to Colleen, I'm going to stop being a Jedi so I can be with my family. Versus Jason, at the time, the new Jedi Order allowed family, allowed relationships and stuff. It's go into attachment, which was very unique how they brought about that within the new Jedi Order and stuff. But Jason, he's like, I'm protecting my daughter. I will do everything what I feel is right, whether going to the dark side. So a little bit to what Anakin was doing, but not exactly, because Anakin was like wanting to learn the dark side to save his wife, and that ended up backfiring. And, he Jason flowed walk, and he's like, I'm not like my grandfather, so where we have the stark contrast with the Disney version of Jason Solo, where he's like, he's worshiping his grandfather, which I'm like, that's an awful take to do. You want something kind of different. You don't want, anyways, I'm not going to go there. Not going to go there because this is not what that's about. This interview is about.
One of the first videos I ever did on my channel, I think it was the second video I ever did. I was 13. It was a 5-minute rant about why Jason Solo is great and Kylo Ren is terrible. I was making comparisons and showing that Jason's motives were good motives, and Kylo Ren, his motives just don't make sense. It's so contrived.
Yeah.
And Jason is so nuanced and layered in comparison.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So I have this pinned up here from Only Good Games. Ask him if he's hailed Waru today. So I don't know what that's about, so please elaborate on that.
Well, I don't know why he's asking me that. I know Only Good Games. He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I've not hailed Waru today. I've never hailed Waru, but I will let you know if that changes.
Okay. I'm like thinking, well, since you like, like different, villains and stuff, Waru is another one that's out there completely different, and the circumstances around that is
Yeah,
very completely different on top of that.
Waru's quite crazy. He's a crazy concept. It's a very Star Trekky concept. Now,
Right.
I like Star Trek. Sitting in front of me is about 8 DVD box sets of Star Trek shows. I love Star Trek as well as Star Wars. So maybe I didn't have as much of an issue as Waru because I'm used to stuff like that in Star Trek. But
Uh-huh.
he's so zany for Star Wars. It's such an interesting. The Crystal Star is quite an experience, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah, and the Soul Assassin has a great point. Interesting how many
Mm,
characters believe they were strong enough to use the dark side and control it and fail at it. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So, we kind of narrowed down basically because my next question for you is your favorite series. So, it would be New Jedi Order then? Did you catch that?
No, no. I think you froze for a minute.
Oh, okay. So, I think we narrowed it down, but would you say that New Jedi Order is your favorite series, or do you have something that you favor more?
Yeah, New Jedi Order is probably my favorite book series. I enjoy every book in New Jedi Order except for the Force Heretic trilogy, which I think is
Yeah.
really dull and slow. Other than
Yeah.
those three books, I think the other 16 books are almost flawless in New Jedi Order. I just think nothing can beat New Jedi Order. Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi tried to tell their own stories that could top New Jedi Order, but nothing could. It was just a masterpiece of writing.
Yeah. Okay. And then Soul Assassin says, question, what do you think was the finale to Quinlan Vos and his family story? So what do you think that is? Like,
Well, after the Siege of Saleucami arc, where Isla Secura
mhm.
redeems Quinlan Vos, it leads to him being a Jedi again, and then he survives Order 66 on Kashyyyk, and then he and Vili and the Wookiees and Thulm and Trasa all uh, hunker down together in a cave to just survive, just live out, and he's now with his family, his son Cordo Vos.
Mhm.
Now, something bad happened. We know that because the Legacy comics establish that Trasa's love interest, Thulm, died during the age of the Galactic Empire. So if it was natural causes, maybe it's not such a bad thing, but something killed Thulm during that time.
Mhm.
We know that. We don't know if it also, that event killed Quinlan and the rest of his family. There's also a short comic called Ghost, where a young Han Solo encounters Quinlan Vos on the run from bounty hunters who want to turn him into the Empire.
Mhm.
And mysterious that was originally considered non-canon, but I
Right.
think it fits with continuity now.
Mhm.
But one thing noticeably absent is his family from that comic.
Right.
So did something happen to them? I don't like to think about that. I want him to have the happy ending, but we know some tragedy occurred with Thulm.
Mhm.
Hopefully he survived. I like to think that they just settled down on the planet. He lived out his days and taught his son how to use the light side to an extent.
Yeah. Who was the lady, the other Jedi that Thom like was attracted to? She was that
Trasa.
there you go. What it wasn't at one point, I know she went into some kind of stasis because she does show up later on in the lore.
I don't know if it's stasis because she's a long-lived species. She
Yeah.
is the same species as Ood Banar from
Yeah.
Tales of the Jedi. She's a Neti, so she could
Hmm.
have just put down her roots for decades,
Hmm.
and then gone out of the tree-like phase that the Neti can go into. We don't know if she went into stasis or not because she's long-lived, but
Yeah.
she definitely survived for a very long time,
Right.
um, all the way to Legacy, where she's on the New Jedi Order Council. So
Hmm.
that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, and that's one thing because the recent conversation that I've been having on Twitter lately is about like the survivors and the new canon of the purge of Order 66 and how is that going to affect their lore going forward with the movie continuity of Luke
Mhm.
being the last of the Jedi and the new, of course the new of the new order and how significant he was. And then so I go back and think with her, and I mean by stasis is basically rooting down and going
Yeah.
in hibernation, I guess you can say, because she is that type of species. Like she survived she, basically went in hiding, basically, and disconnected from the galaxy and in general, all through that time. So what does this lead to? And I'm probably, I stay on top of the original lore, the Disney lore, to compare and contrast. So I'm curious now, what is their explanation for Ahsoka and for the other
Yeah,
ones that have to make it through the OT without being involved? You know, so.
I don't know how they're going to do that. I think the EU did a great job by having the characters who survived. Um, a lot of them perished. So
Mhm,
even if they survived Order 66, Darth Vader was this terrific villain during
mhm,
the Jedi Purge. And he tracked
right.
down and killed many of them.
Mhm,
And then Jedi like Ferris Olin, he
mhm,
even joins the Rebels.
mhm.
But then they explain why he doesn't train Luke because he gets killed by Vader. And the Jedi who end up joining the Rebel Alliance end up perishing so that it doesn't contradict with the original trilogy with
Mhm.
how Luke has to be trained by Obi-Wan and Yoda, and he's the last of the old Jedi, the first of the new. See, with the EU, it took a lot of the Jedi who survived Order 66 and gave them side missions to do, put them out to far-flung planets in hiding so that they can reemerge later and not break continuity. So
Right.
I think the EU handled it well. It's going to be
Mhm.
very interesting to see how Disney canon thinks about it because
Yeah.
they literally named one of their movies The Last Jedi, and yet Dave Filoni loves Ahsoka, probably is never going to kill her off. So
Mhm.
how is Ahsoka going to exist in the sequel timeline? I don't follow Disney canon. I don't read Disney canon. I try not to talk about it. I try to ignore it as much as I can.
Yeah.
But it's
I
going to
respect.
be very weird how they're going to try to uh, make it fit. Like, there's a Fallen Order Jedi game with Jedi Survival Order 66. How are they going to explain that the characters there don't interact with the original trilogy or the sequel trilogy? Or maybe they'll do, like, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. It's going to be weird, but it'll be interesting to hear about.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so let's get back into the beloved original lore here. So and do you have a favorite region of the Star Wars galaxy? Like if you can like have the map in front of you, what intrigues you? Which region intrigues you?
Well, I know that I would steer way clear of Tatooine because that place is no good. Um, I might I might like to visit Coruscant because
Okay.
that might be cool. Or Yavin 4, it's a beautiful place.
Hmm.
But a dangerous place, but a beautiful place. A region of space that really intrigues me is the Hates cluster because
Okay.
it's behind like a nebula, so
Hmm.
the Empire couldn't take over that area, and the Hapans were able to stay separate from the Empire and have their own government. And there's some very interesting stuff in there. Like there's a very obscure species called the Jebi, which
Yeah.
its official image is drawn in crayon from the Galaxy magazine, and it's from a planet called Rainbow. It was created by a 6-year-old, um, but it was part of the lore via a design an alien contest. And then
Hmm.
the Essential Atlas takes that planet, that super obscure planet, and puts it in the Hapes cluster. I just think it's so funny to think that the um, kind of high up, very proper, very proud Hapan government
Hmm.
rules over a planet with a 3-headed, 12-legged, tentacled species that's official image is drawn in crayon. I just think
Yeah.
it's so funny that that planet is in their jurisdiction. Daniel Wallace, who made the Essential Atlas, that was a brilliant connection.
Yeah. And Raven just says, I love Brennan's encyclopedic knowledge of the EU, and I really do too as well. And it's interesting to see in the past how much George and his company allowed fans to get into and
Yes.
involved with the EU, the expansion of the lore. Like we had the contest for Cadus's name, and there's other little mini contests to help develop the EU that got the fans involved. And George even loved parodies, even shots at his own lore. He
Yeah.
enjoyed all of that. And now when you do something, it's not welcomed at all. So that's another thing there. But I'm not, like I said, we're not here for that. But
I
I do
think a big, I
go
think
ahead.
that's a big attribute. Sorry for interrupting. To the expanded universe that they focused on the fans, and that's something I didn't see Disney Canon do a lot, like focus on the fans. That's what the EU did so well. Like you said, and mentioned the contests that there were for fans to get involved in the lore. They got to name Darth Titus by voting on him. They got to name the book Shadow Games out of 4 options for titles. You know, there's all these things that got the fans into the lore. There was hyperspace, which fans could submit articles that added to the lore that could be published and become part of the lore. There were these contests where you could design aliens that would
Mm-hmm.
become part of the lore.
Yeah.
They wanted the fans to get involved. That's a great point that you made about that, and that's why the EU is so great, because there's fan input there,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really important, I think, for a franchise to excel.
Exactly. And that's another reason why I loved it so much is because we got to the continuation of the lore. We got to see the development of things that weren't going to be shown on the movies. George even allowed like how Anakin got his scar to be
Yeah,
explained in the EU, which means that it's continuity. It's part of the lore. It's part of one overall saga, which has been repeated so many times, and so I loved how he used all the media of his business, of his company, of this franchise to tell his story, not just the movies. And so people who think that Star Wars is only a movie based product, no, it's not. If you really want to get into the overall continuity and lore, it goes beyond just the movies. It's all single one saga, story, event, or history. And fans were welcomed into it just as much. And that's one thing that I really loved and adored, about George and Lucasfilm in general. So,
yeah.
um, yeah. So I got my Star Wars account following this kid. His knowledge is refreshing. So there you go. There you
Thank
go.
you.
So we're going to come into another quiz question here. So are you ready?
Hopefully,
Okay. So who is the Jedi Watchman that discovered Quinlan Voss's Force abilities?
I believe that was Thome. I believe it was Thome who discovered Quinlan Vos's abilities.
Yes, it was because he was the watchman that was in that sector during the time, and there's events to how he discovered. And Kifu are very interesting. We have
Yeah,
even Boba Fett's wife, and so she has that psychometric ability as well, and that goes. We
yeah,
get more into her character arc in Legacy, which is very interesting. I really enjoyed the expansion of like her and Boba Fett's relationship and what happened, why he is the way he is a little bit more, because he wasn't this badass bounty hunter that was kind of self-centered. There's reasons why, and parts of it was because of how he lost his father and stuff, and then what happened during that time. And yes, you're right, it's Sentis Vel, who his wife, yeah.
there
So
might also be a shared descendant of both Quinlan Vos and Luke Skywalker, because Nat Skywalker, aka Bantha Rauch from the Legacy
mhm.
comics, his wife is from the clan Vos,
Okay.
and her husband's the great grandson of Luke Skywalker. So some relatives of Quinlan Vos are in the clan Vos, obviously. So descendants of clan Vos, um, and descendant of Luke Skywalker had children together. With
Mhm.
I can't remember her name. I think it's Drew, but
Okay.
his name was Nat Skywalker, but also known as Bantha is his code
Mhm.
name. And he was a Skywalker. She was from the clan Vos. So I just thought that was interesting.
There you go. So there you guys go. So we'll look into more of that because I haven't really researched behind like the descendants and who partnered with who during that time. So there we go. See, he's like, I went and did my homework. Congratulations. That's pretty cool. So those who want to know more, I may have to research that and do a little lore video on that because I think that's amazing. I think that's interesting to bring up because we all want to know what ifs and how these guys came to be in Legacy,
Yeah.
the comics. And so that's a very interesting one right there. I overlooked that one, but that's fine. We all learn from each other, right?
Mm.
All right. So who is your what species is your favorite species of Star Wars? If you could pick
Ooh,
one.
that's very interesting. I really like cataloging all the species in Star Wars.
Okay.
There's so many great ones. I like some of the ones that look like dogs, like the canine ones, like the Shistavanins, or Shistavanian, however you want to pronounce it.
Hmm.
They're the Wolfmen. They're from the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Yeah.
Bulith Mon from Clone Wars 2003 was a member of that species. I just think they're visually cool. I really do like the Kiffer, Quinlan Vos species, due to their like psychometric abilities. It makes them really interesting, and their culture is really cool as well.
Hmm.
Um, Trying to think of all of the different ones because there's so many great Star Wars species.
Right.
But it's hard to single out one. There's so many species that I do enjoy. Um, an example of another one, Yuzon Bong are really cool. I like them. Chistori, that's a really good one as well. They look really cool.
Hmm.
The Cathar are really cool from SWTOR and Tales of the Jedi, and even Dawn of the Jedi. They're essentially cat people, and they live in tree houses on savannas and hunt their prey. And a couple of them become Jedi because they have high force sensitivity. They're a cool one as well.
Yeah. Wow. So you like really have this. You're like, I can't choose just one, so I'll give you a
I
hand.
can't. I cannot. There's so many cool Star Wars species.
Yes, there is. It's like sometimes these questions, it's like you can't narrow them down just to just one. And I appreciate that because you can't really, but sometimes you can, depending on the person. So we'll go into this now. Favorite Star Wars vehicle or vessel and why? So you might have a multiple answer to this here.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
I think maybe Z95 Headhunters. I just think they're really cool. Uh,
Okay.
they show up a lot in like the New Republic era, but in other eras as well, and in NJO. I just think they've got a really cool name, and they're really cool ships. They're kind of, I believe they're just kind of stealthier and more maneuverable than like an X-wing. So
Yeah.
I just think they're pretty cool.
Okay. Okay. And then let's see here. Favorite Darth Vader story. So he is like the most epic villain of all time. Do you have a favorite story arc within the overall lore of him when he comes into the picture?
Oh man, these are some really hard questions. I like he's good in Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. That's a good
Mhm.
story, but he's also really, really good in the Purge comic series.
Yeah.
He just seems unstoppable. He's just plowing through Jedi in that series. It's crazy. And then there's also a good short story called "In His Image," which
Yeah.
I think that's by Karen Travis, funnily enough. But it like explores kind of his psyche
Hmm.
and how he's feeling about things in the post Revenge of the Sith era of Star Wars. That's an interesting character presented there as well. That's a couple of them. There's many great Vader stories. I'm sure I'm forgetting
Yeah.
though.
You can't just, like I said, you can't pick just one, but do you have one favorite moment if you could pick one? Just one favorite moment like that really stuck in your head. You're like, okay, they got Vader right here. Are they
Um,
true to what how I see
I
Vader?
think so. I think it's hard to pick a more iconic Vader moment out of the EU than the movies because the movies have some really iconic Vader moments, like Vader revealing that Luke's his son. I don't know how you can get a better Vader moment than that. Or
Hmm.
Vader's betrayal of Palpatine and Return to the Light. There's such beautiful stuff there.
Hmm.
But from the EU, I think I'm gonna have to go back to the Purge comics. There's that he fights off I think 11 Jedi, and there's a bit
Yeah.
where all 11 Jedi are staring down at him, and he like bursts the door open, and he comes in with his cape flying behind him, and his lightsaber held high, and it's just so epic. I think.
Hmm. Yes, and I could see some of the panels from that comic in my head already.
Yeah,
Because it's like if you want to know how he handled the purge and these Jedi, because they set him up too. That was like a setup here to try
yeah.
to destroy him.
They baited him by saying that Obi-Wan would be there, and
Yeah.
so he showed up wanting to kill Obi-Wan,
Hmm.
and
Yep.
yeah,
He's like, "Gotcha. You guys failed.
yeah.
You
Well,
guys failed.
and
You guys are gone."
not all of the Jedi knew that either. The 10
Hmm.
Jedi there thought they were there to discuss how they could restore the Republic, and
Right.
then one Jedi had already invited and leaked the location of them to Vader because she thought
Hmm.
the way to restore the Republic would be to kill Vader, which would cripple Palpatine. So,
Hmm.
without all of their knowledge, she drew Vader to their location without warning them, and then they all died.
I know they kind of set up the rest of the Jedi too because they didn't know the plan. So that's
Yeah.
That was crazy in itself as well.
Yeah,
Okay. So do you have a favorite Obi-Wan story within the lore and why? Since we're going master and apprentice here.
I think
Basically.
he's great in Jedi Apprentice. He's
Okay.
great in Jedi Quest, and he's great in The Last of the Jedi. But I don't. Jude Watson writes Obi-Wan so well, I think. But I think John Jackson Miller's Kenobi is like one of the best novels in the EU. It just
Mhm.
shows how deeply scarred Obi-Wan is by Anakin's betrayal, how he's
Mhm.
trying to move past that, how
Yeah.
he's trying to battle not being able to be a Jedi anymore because he's got this duty to Luke and protect Luke, so he can't reveal he's a Jedi. So he has to let horrible things happen that he wouldn't have let happen otherwise. So he's trying
Mhm.
to come to terms with this in that book. Another one that's like that is Lone Wolf: A Tale of Obi-Wan and Luke by
Mhm.
Abel G. Pena. I really
Mhm.
like that one because Obi-Wan also reflects on Quinlan Vos and the friendship he had with Quinlan Vos, as seen in the Stark Hyperspace War,
Yes.
and reflects on how he's like, I hope Quinlan isn't dead. All of my friends are gone, and it's the story of how Obi-Wan takes Luke to Tatooine. He has a little adventure. He even comes across Vima Deboda, a
Mhm.
descendant of Nomi Sunrider from the Dark Empire comics. So it's a great story. Abel G. Pena is a master of continuity.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of gave me chills there, but yeah, thinking about that. Um, so with that, favorite Luke Skywalker story since once we get to the OT past Return of the Jedi, it's very much Luke Skywalker heavy, except for with
Yeah.
some exceptions like the X-Wing series and
Mm.
other little standoffs, so or standalones. So what is your favorite Luke Skywalker moment, or even story, or
I
both?
think I think it would be hard to pick a better Luke Skywalker character arc than the character arc from the beginning of New Jedi Order to the end of New Jedi Order. We talked about this a bit earlier. The turmoil Luke has with he doesn't want to combat the Vong and have all of his Jedi go dark, but then he's watching his Jedi get slaughtered, and he's trying to figure out: do I stay a pacifist or do I uh, battle these Yuzon Vongs like the galaxy depends on it? And I think it's a very interesting arc. There's so many great Luke moments in NJO, especially in Unifying Force when he and Jason take down the Yuzon Vong leaders. There's some great scenes there.
Oh yeah, yeah. That right there. In the unifying force, didn't Luke get struck by the Gaddafi the stick, not the Gaddafi stick, but the what I'm talking about, their little venom stick.
The Amphistaffs,
There you go. I'm like, shit, I can't think of that name. But yeah, and then so
yeah,
he's trying to put himself in a trance. So he doesn't go be overcome with the poison. And
yeah,
so now it's up to Jason.
yeah. I think he managed to take out Shimra,
Right.
who was one of the Yuzon Vong in command, but it turns out Shimra was a puppet, even though
Yeah.
they thought he was the big bad. There was a guy behind him named oh goodness, I'm
Amani?
forgetting his name. I,
Or
I
no.
can't I
Was
can't
it
remember it, but it began with an O, I think,
Yeah, Omani or something like that.
something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, and so yeah, he took out Shimra, and then he got Amphistaffed, and he had to like purge the venom from his system while he had to Onimi. There we go. We're in
yeah,
Star Wars.
Onimi. So we kind of got it
Um,
wrong. But you got what we're saying.
yeah, and so then yeah, it was left to Jason to take down Onimi, and that
Mhm.
was probably the height of Jason's heroism in the EU, taking
Yeah,
down Onimi to end the war. It
yeah,
was interesting how Luke was able to do it in part, but then the Amphistaff got him, and he wasn't able to.
yeah.
With
He
that,
had to, start taking care of himself,
yeah,
in order to survive. And that scene in itself, like when you read through that too is like heavy. Like
yeah,
if you guys, people who haven't read the New Jedi Order and hear some negativity about it, give it a try because I guarantee you it's gonna keep you hooked. You're gonna have some
yeah,
emotions going on in there. You're gonna want to know what happens next. No one is safe. I mean, yeah, people liked and still kind of liked it, but they were still like, it's too dark for me. However,
mm,
I like the story, whatever. But it's a welcomed darkness because the heroes needed something different to push them forward and develop them you
yeah.
know, and that's good writing in itself.
It really is.
Soul Assassin says, "Do you think Luke ever got those power converters?" I think eventually he got some power converters for some kind of ship he needed, so I think that kind of was a resolution to it in its own self. And then Kenobi says, Kenobi shines really well in the episode 3 novel. Correct. That's Revenge of the Sith. Being immersed so deep in the Force that the Force possesses him to speak on the invisible hand. Yeah. That in itself is the Revenge of the Sith novelization is a great movie novel and EU novel in one.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have a $20 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting, just popping in to show some love with a nice little purple heart. Thank you so much. So Savong La, there we go. So he's just, and let's see here. Is it really OG Saturday? Yeah, this is Talking EU, where I interview an EU Star Wars fan and how they got into the EU and more and plus. So you're learning all of what Brennan here, what got him to the EU, what he loves, getting into deeper conversation about the lore, seeing it through his eyes. This is what this is about. All right. So now we're coming up to another quiz question. So who rescued Quinlan Vos from drowning?
Qui-Gon Jinn. Well, Obi-Wan jumped in, but then Qui-Gon had to pull them out with the Force.
Yeah, exactly. So Obi-Wan attempted, and then Qui-Gon had to pull both of them out. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? Leave you guys alone for a second, and this is what happens?
Quinlan tells the story, and he's like, we were doing the brash thing that male Padawans do. Yeah. They were showing off their Force powers over a waterfall. Quinlan hit his head, falls in. Obi-Wan jumps after him, but then Obi-Wan is like passing them out too, so Qui-Gon like Force pulls him out. It's a great scene, and it's used very well because it like kind of cemented their friendship.
Right.
And then later during the Clone Wars, when Quinlan's on the other side, he has a moment with Obi-Wan where they reflect on that and reflect on how it felt when Qui-Gon pulled them. It felt like the light was pulling them out of the darkness, and that was an analogy Quinlan was using for how he was feeling during the war.
Yeah. So much good callbacks, like when you get back and forth between their younger years and and then as adults and stuff. Such great writing. And people who say the EU didn't have continuity and keep track with each other, if you haven't read it, to know that even simple things like that, simple gestures like that, were a great callback to the characters in noting how it feels going from light to dark or whatever. Very, very good stuff. And Surfer says, in my humble opinion, New Jedi Order was that what Star Wars needed during that era, besides the prequels, of course. Yeah. With the prequels, we had to see why the galaxy got into the state it did.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my things is like, we got to see. And when you go into war and when a new faction takes over, there's going to be the politics that lie within its own galaxy to the reason why. And if you don't share some of that, how are you going to get the point across? How are you getting the point across to how Palpatine was manipulating both sides of the war? What was going on within those factions to why they got there and stuff? So very good stuff.
I think that the Darth Plagueis novel really makes the prequels better because I know what George was trying to do with all the political stuff, but for some people he didn't get it across quite as well as he meant to. Plagueis like really, in my opinion, like fixes that and makes what George did better by showing all the chess pieces moving around. Like it doesn't make sense if you just watch Phantom Menace why there's a 13-year-old queen, but then Plagueis shows that was manipulation by Plagueis and Sidious to get her elected there. So it's just so much nuance to Plagueis that I think really makes the prequels better as a whole.
Yeah, because he comes from a banking family, a business family that knew how to influence.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that was like, whoa, okay. So, because when you look at it and like you apply our reality, you want to compare to our reality, and we thrive upon survival with banking, money, whatever, there's that influence there, whether we like it or not, and that really shows how much. And then, with Plagueis's background on how he is from a different mother from the original siblings and stuff, and how he even destroyed his own family, like giving him a false cure to get, take over the family's heir, basically, to be the family. That too is like deception right there. Like it set up the character so well. So yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So, what is who is your favorite EU author and why? If you have to choose one or two or something like that.
This
'Cause-
is the one that can get people unfollowing me because Troy Denning is my favorite EU author, and you, if you're an EU fan, you know that there's a mixed reception to Mr. Denning's works.
oh yeah.
Um, there's a specific YouTuber I think of immediately, a German YouTuber, Quality Autism, absolutely despises Troy
Yeah.
Denning. So there's a lot of hatred for Troy Denning, but that being said, I really enjoyed Troy Denning's books, Star by Star specifically. I liked Tatooine Ghost as well. I thought it was
Hmm.
cool. A Forest Apart, the ebook he wrote, is really good. His Legacy of the Force books are pretty solid. Fate of the Jedi books are good too. I really like Dark Nest, which a lot of people don't like Dark Nest.
I
So
rather enjoyed Dark Nest too. I
that's
liked
great.
how there
Yeah,
was a discovery of Padme and what really happened between her and Anakin, what Anakin really did, and how heartbreaking that was to Luke because it's like, and I forgave him. And he's
yeah.
like going into meditation, crying and resolving all of that because he's like, I forgave this man, my father. And then now I discovered this. And so it really just put things into motion for Luke too.
And they use it for Jason as well because when
Hmm.
they're reviewing like the holo recordings of what happened with between Padme and Anakin, Jason doesn't see it as wrong, which is very strong hinting about the arc that his character takes in Legacy of the Force. So when Jason sees that, and I think Leia says, "Do you not see that there's something wrong here?"
Hmm.
He's so controlling, and Jason's like, "I just see a husband who loves his wife," and so that's just instant red flags that Jason is going to be going down a dark path. I think Dark Nest is written very well with how it's got that emotionalness, like you said, for with Luke Skywalker, thinking I forgave a man and I didn't know that he has done all these things. I don't know if I don't remember if Luke found out that he killed children as well,
Hmm.
in Dark Nest, but he did some terrible things and Luke's like struggling with that while also pushing forward the story for Jason's similar fall to Vader.
Hmm. Oh, there you go. Hey, folks, Dark Nest trilogy is one of my personal favorites. Yeah, and once, and that goes with Tatooine Ghost, and I know Matt Wilkins is like, I can care less about that, kind of that novel. I rather enjoyed it myself because at the time, after George allowed people to start writing in and referencing in the prequel trilogy, because he's like, I'm done now. The authors, of course, are going to go ahead and use that to kind of link the continuity history and discovery. And I think that Tatooine Ghost was a great discovery, like novel for Leia on her heritage, about her father, about forgiving and starting her family, because we had to get that because in Truce and Bakura, she's like, leave. She basically told her father to shove it when he appeared to her. She wasn't ready to forgive. Han was the voice of reason for her in both those books.
Yeah, Han is written really well in Tatooine Ghost, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, Tatooine Ghost is a very necessary story for Leia. It
Mm-hmm.
really, like, I've seen some people say the unofficial Leia trilogy was Truce at Bakura, uh, Courtship, and Tatooine Ghost. It is
Mm-hmm.
like a unofficial Leia trilogy. I think it does a lot for her character. One scene specifically that stuck out to me in Tatooine Ghost is there's a scene where Leia runs a bath and takes a bath on Tatooine, and she's like reflecting on how ridiculous it is that she gets to take a bath while so many people are dying on Tatooine of
Mm-hmm.
thirst. And she's like reflecting on this,
Right.
and it's something I didn't think about. Like running water on Tatooine is like it's like a huge luxury, and I never thought of that before. And so she's like running the water. She's like thinking so many people on this planet don't have access to this, and I'm not even drinking it. And it was quite a poignant scene in my opinion.
Right, right. And it gives, and I'm not trying to say, oh well, her privileged life, because we know that she was orphaned, and
Yeah,
Belle basically took her, and her legacy was like her mom's, whereas Luke is like her father's. And for her to put in realizations like, this is how my brother grew up,
yeah,
and put all that in realization, and my father was really a hero for his kindness and his compassion versus how he was seen as Vader, or how she's seen him as Vader. So it was really, it's such a great growth development for her as well. So great story there. So, um, so I I'm not against Troy Denning. There are some stories I'm like, okay, he could have done better.
Yeah,
I think, for instance, one of them in Legacy of the Force. I think Karen Travis's stronger ones are in Legacy of the Force.
yeah.
So, they can falter between all of them, and what era they're writing on and what they're trying to contribute and how they get the story across. So, yeah.
I really like Karen Travis's Legacy of the Force works, like you said, but the Republic Commando books, I don't enjoy those quite as much. It definitely is about what era they're writing and what the purpose of their writing is.
Hmm.
And I just think Troy Denning was a really strong author, but um, it's it's hard because sometimes I feel like James Luceno or Matthew Stover could take that, but that's an answer that a lot of other people have for favorite author.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit. So what was your impression of the old Jedi Order, so the PT era? Maybe you can go a little further than that in the Old Republic versus the new Jedi Order. So what was your impression between the two? What you liked and not liked about that? How you may have liked the changes Luke, you know, enacted, whether he knew he enacted them or not. Because there's some things he's like, at first he's like attachments he really wasn't sure about. I think it was the Survivor's Quest when he started pondering about attachments and marriages for the Jedi and stuff like that. So what do you think between the two?
There's obviously a very big contrast
Mm-hmm.
in several regions of their doctrine and their practice. I think
Mm-hmm.
with the Jedi, you have to take it back years, decades to the original Jedi
Mm-hmm.
order from Dawn of the Jedi. That order had different rules than the Jedi we saw in the prequel trilogy, but at the same time, it was almost more free. It was more
Mm-hmm.
focused on individual exploration, which I
Yeah.
think the new Jedi Order is very like individual focused, whereas the Jedi Order from the prequels is very order focused,
Yeah.
and they really are an order because in the Old Republic they're a little more loose, but gradually they started to hold to doctrines, traditions, um, that they created for themselves, and then they were rigid. They said attachments forbidden, but yet they have these attachments to all of their codes, all of their practices.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can see some contradictions within that Jedi Order, but then Luke's Jedi Order, he didn't know a lot of this, and he and Tion are having to comb through what little they do know since the Empire purged much of the
Right.
knowledge about that Jedi Order. Luke's Jedi Order is more free. It's more focused on individuality, finding who you are, rather than on a set of doctrines. It's less rigid. It's more open. Obviously, marriage is a big difference that the new Jedi Order had that the prequel era Jedi did not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that Luke's new Jedi Order is definitely the one I would want to be a part of because I think it was less strict.
Mm-hmm.
Um, although that would mean I would have had to fight the Yuzon Vong War, which is a terrifying thought. But
Yeah.
at the same time, the new Jedi Order was more open. And what's interesting is Jedi who came from the old Jedi Order, like Kukruk or Trasa, they
Mm-hmm.
accepted Luke's new Jedi Order,
Yeah.
and they accepted his values and were going to hold by it. And they were willing to let go of the old Jedi Order, which is it's a testament to the strengths of Kukruk and Trasa that they saw that their old order was doomed with their practices, and that they were willing to accept, the new Jedi Order.
Yeah. Yes. So what do you think about Kip Duran during the New Jedi Order series and how he um was like, Luke, wake the fuck up. Sorry, but I'm just gonna cuss. We need to fight, because we do see him fighting. He did get almost destroyed where Han before after the fall of what's the planet's name again? Where the moon dropped on the
Cern Fidel.
Stern Bradell. There you go. So, they found Kip after that. They listened to his bocce message and stuff like that. So, what do you think about him during that timeline? Because we had, some were like, you know what, we need to fight now. We need to stop, being passive and fight now. So, what do you think about Kip Duran during that time?
Well, I think we were all meant to, as readers, empathize with Kip during New Jedi Order, but at the
Yeah,
same time be slightly frustrated with him.
yeah,
So I think he was written very well. I don't think Kevin J. Anderson would have liked the direction they took Kip in New Jedi Order, but
mhm,
I really liked it. He was
yeah,
like really strong, and he was advocating for we've got to destroy this threat. I've seen terrible things already. Come on, Luke, we've got to do something. And Luke is like, no. But then Kip undermines him by going against him, going behind his back and doing the things Luke has told him not to do anyway. So for that, that was frustrating from Luke's perspective. You know, his Jedi Order that he's founded, now Kip's leading the splinter group of other Jedi who are
Yeah.
like not listening to him, and you feel frustration for that, but at the same time, you understand where Kip is coming from,
Yeah.
and I think you empathize with that Kip is right and Luke is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, Kip doesn't go about it the best way. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very nuanced and interesting, the direction that Kip Duran went. He kind of chilled out towards the end of it, like in Dark Journey. He
Mm-hmm.
was more like abiding by Luke's rules because Luke was finally, taking more action. And then
Mm-hmm.
towards Legacy of the Force, he was very mellow and he was like, he was a voice of wisdom. So I think it's interesting that he kind of, I think, grew up a bit over the war.
Yeah, I think the war does make you grow. Especially something like that. So still staying on the new order versus the old and stuff. Who is your favorite character in the old and the new order? So if you have to pick, another hard one there. You have to pick, other than Quinlan Vos.
Yeah. Okay. Other than Quinlan Vos, let's see, a Jedi who I like from the Old Order. I like Dash Jenner, who is from the Dark Times comic book series.
Okay.
He's essentially Legolas from The Lord of the Rings as
Okay.
a Jedi, at least
Okay.
visually. He's got long white hair and he has green robes and everything. He just looks
Yes.
like Legolas. But he's quite an interesting character because he's a part of the Jedi Order from the prequels, but then after Order 66, he lets go of all the codes and
Hmm.
the rituals and the traditions of the Jedi, and then he's just
Hmm.
willing to do whatever to strike against the Empire. So he has an interesting journey as well. He's another flawed character. I like all the flawed characters.
Hmm.
He's kind of in that same vein as Quinlan and uh, and Jason, but unlike Jason, Das and Quinlan have happier endings. From the New Jedi Order, not Jason Solo, Tenel Ka is one of my favorite female characters
Okay.
in the EU. I really like her. She's a great character. She has to balance being a Jedi with being a queen and leading an entire powerful wing of the galaxy. So I really liked Tenel Ka in NJO and in Young Jedi Knights for that matter, and also Lobaka. You can't go wrong with a Wookiee Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing too, and I'm pretty sure you've seen the fact that George is like, I really don't want, Wookiee,
Yeah,
Jedi because of how they are quick to emotion, like ripping arms off and stuff. So
yeah.
that was interesting that we only have a very few and far in between Jedi Wookiees.
I think we have overall four, only four in the EU. There's Lobaka from NJO. There's
Hmm.
Gunji from Filoni's TCW.
Yeah,
There's Tyvoka from the Republic comics.
right.
And then there was a Wookiee Jedi in the Wizards of the Coast RPG material. I can't remember his name.
Okay, I don't know that one. Or I know there were four. I just, like I said, I don't know that one in general because I don't have that source in front of me and stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah, so I thought it was interesting, take that George was like, this should be very far in between for the type
yeah.
of characters these Wookiees are.
And
Yeah.
what's interesting is they listened to him.
Mm-hmm.
After he said that, there weren't this abundance of Wookiee Jedis. I think it's interesting because in Disney canon,
Mm-hmm.
not speaking about Disney canon, but because I don't like to do that typically. But I heard someone told me that there's already more Wookiee Jedi from the Disney canon timeline than from the EU timeline, which
Yeah.
is an interesting thing to hear from, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's
because
interesting.
everybody
Yeah,
loved Chewie. Everybody loved Chewie, so why not make a bunch of Wookiee Jedi because of Chewie, kind of deal.
yeah,
And and they're like, we're so glad that he was gone because Chewie was killed, and we wanted to keep Chewie, kind of deal. And I'm like, Chewie's not this big pet that you guys think he is. He's a character. He's a phenomenal character, and even they in this new lore kind of got Chewie wrong when it comes to the life debt and stuff. Like he should have just already gone, like hightailed it out of there after Han had died. There was no
mm,
reason for him to stick around. But that's Disney lore. We're not here to really discuss that. Just a little thing that I noticed. So, um, who do you favor more, Jedi or Sith, and why?
I prefer Jedi. I always really liked Jedi. One of the first things I did when I got into the EU, I wish I still had the paper. I wrote down a list of every Jedi that I could find, and I had like over 300 Jedi names, and I just thought it was so cool to like catalog and think about all the different Jedi. The Jedi are so diverse; they come from so many different species.
Hmm.
Like there's a Hutt Jedi, Beldorian. There's a Rabbit Jedi with Ikrit, who's a
Yes.
Kukavan. There's a brain Jedi with tentacles and ears named Uru from Tales of the Jedi. There's these
Hmm.
tree Jedi with Ud Banar and Trausa. There's Thawne, who's like a dewback essentially.
Right.
He's a crook thigh, but there's all these different species that end up being Jedi, and they're unified by their practices as serving the light side. And I just find it interesting that there's so many different Jedi from so many different species. And I think there's less diversity among the Sith in
Yeah.
terms of aliens. So I find them more plain, but at the same time, I really like Jedi who like go Sith for a time. You know, who are tempted by the dark side. I think the most interesting characters are almost somewhere in between. I think.
So do you believe in gray Jedi?
I don't think Grey Jedi are a part of the EU. I think it's an interesting concept when Vergir brings up the gray area of the Force. Um, and I think some Jedi kind of walk that line a little bit. Some people say Qui Gon. I don't really see Qui Gon. I
Yeah.
see that Quinlan or Dash Jenner walk the line a bit more, but at the same time, they were more either one side or the other. They were
Hmm.
never really in the middle. I can't think of a character who was like straight in the middle that they could be classified as a gray Jedi. I think there's a gray area of the Force that Vergir talks about, but I don't think there were any true examples of gray Jedi in the EU.
Yeah, the only thing that was mentioned as gray Jedi is the person's attitude towards obeying the council. And that was
Right?
mentioned
Okay.
in one of the comics because they're like, oh, yeah, Quinlan's a gray Jedi because he doesn't listen to the council. So it's
Mm.
basically a person's attitude of authority.
So by
Everybody
that
has a bit of that when you look at that because some people, not everybody's going to agree with their commands, and some of them are not going to follow through.
by
So,
that definition, I think a lot of Jedi would fall under being gray Jedi, including Qui Gon, because Qui Gon
right.
obviously has a disrespect for authority seen in Jedi Apprentice and in the Phantom Menace as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
exactly.
another interesting order that I think is super interesting that a lot of people hate is in SWOTOR they introduced light side Sith, who are
Hmm.
Sith who believe that using and harnessing the light side will get them the power they need
Yeah.
without corrupting and corroding their flesh. To me, it makes sense because Sith are egotistical and self-preserving. So if they're a Sith who realize that using the dark side will literally wrinkle your face, yellow your eyes, cripple your body over time from use, then it makes sense that some Sith, with their egos and their self-preservation and their quest for immortality, would abandon the dark side if they thought the light side could get them the power they need to be Sith
Hmm.
without like just absolutely rotting their flesh away. I think it could work if it was written right, but I get why a lot of people are like kind of like put off by the concept.
Yeah. And then it kind of takes away from like becoming a force ghost in a sense, because then you have that where you transcend from your physical um and stay within the force, like with
Yeah.
with your spiritual or whatever you want to call that. Yeah. So with that, do you have a favorite force society?
Outside of the Jedi and Sith, then.
Yes, yeah. So
Uh,
like you have the Anting monks, you have
yeah.
like the Janissari.
Let me think. What were the Keldors called? Who had their own Force Order? I think they were
Oh,
called.
um
Were they called the Prophets or
Barando
something?
sages, Barando. Yeah.
Barando, that's what it was. Yeah, yeah. I thought they were really interesting. I think it was it Fate of the Jedi that explored their order quite a lot early
Yes.
on, and Jason spent time with them. I thought they were really interesting. They were my favorite Force Order that was explored in Fate of the Jedi.
Hmm. Okay. And with that, do you have any favorite couture stories or couture like characters? Because we haven't really gotten to that side of the lore,
Yeah.
that side of the history, going way back.
For me, I have not been able to play SWOTOR yet, so I can't really speak to Old Republic, but I
Hmm.
know the basics of what happens there. KOTOR 1 and 2 are both fantastic games. I think my opinion is somewhat unpopular. I prefer KOTOR 2 to KOTOR.
Okay.
I just think the story is better.
Hmm.
With KOTOR, it's more loose to where there's all these side quests. But with
Yeah.
KOTOR 2, I feel like it was a more directed story,
Hmm.
um, and more like driven forward rather than all these different side quests. I think it was more like a single storyline focused, and I like that. But in that sort of era, I think the KOTOR comics are like super good. The Tales
Hmm.
of the Jedi comics are great. But favorite characters from that era, I like Zane Carrick a lot. He's the Jedi who can't do anything right. He's such an interesting character in my opinion. From the game itself, I've never been a huge Revan fan, but I do appreciate Revan. I
Hmm.
thought that the most interesting Sith was Darth Nihilus with this wound in the Force concept.
Yes. Okay.
I thought that was really interesting. And Darth Sion too is interesting. How he's just like too angry to die. That's the concept we see with Darth Maul eventually. Even though Filoni probably wasn't trying to make this great EU connection, it ends up being similar. That Maul was too angry to die, just like Sion was.
Hmm.
Since Sion was pre-established, I'm more okay with Maul being alive, but at the same time, that's a kind of controversial topic there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is controversial because I was, in a conversation about that too. Like, Ma was too angry to die. That's just a cop out kind of deal.
Yeah.
It was to keep him alive, or what have you. And for me, like, I was happy with Maul's characterization and his death because it like put forth Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship, him becoming a knight and becoming, the mentor, the teacher to Anakin
Yeah.
and stuff. And for him to come back, I think it kind of lessened that. And I think maybe George and Filoni didn't think about that. Maybe they did, who knows? But I really think that if they would have kept Maul dead, I think that would have kept the more significance of the, Obi-Wan story of, being knighted because he killed the returning Sith, I guess you can say. So, but that's just how I feel about that, and I think about that. So, what do you think about that? Did you think it was a mistake, or are you fine with it?
I'm on the fence about it
Yeah,
because when I was younger, I really liked TCW because I
yeah,
was a kid. But
yes,
now that I've read almost all of the EU, I'm very frustrated by TCW.
hmm,
It's just aggravating. It's just aggravating that so many contradictions were made. Like Filoni claims he's an EU fan.
right,
If he's an EU fan, why did he contradict the lore so many times? And that frustrates me.
yeah,
But that being said, I have a somewhat controversial take with Maul, I think, because Darth Maul, before he died, well, it was intended to die in Phantom Menace. I
hmm,
don't know if he was a Sith by definition of Sith. He was more, I would argue, comparable to like an Emperor's hand.
hmm,
Um, I don't think, I don't know if Palpatine considered him a Sith or not, or if he was just using him as a pawn, the way Dooku did with Ventress, or Palpatine did with Mara Jade, using him as a tool. But when Maul comes back, Maul acts so much like a Sith. He
hmm,
wants to create his own Sith Order. He takes an apprentice. He seems truly like motivated to be a Sith.
hmm,
So I think that's interesting because when he returns, I think that's when he's most like a Sith because he has ambition by that point.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
he had.
my
Yeah,
thing is, I seen him as a Sith, but I seen him as a tool to Sidious on getting to Anakin. Like once they discovered Anakin, and then so after Maul left, then Doku took his place, and
yeah,
then from there he's like used Doku as a temporary because his initial plan was Anakin.
yeah,
And so we see that evolution because we see how Sith masters, the rule of two, how they really are. It's like it's all about them, what they want, and if their apprentice survives and kills them, then good for them. But other than that, they're just
yeah,
tools.
yeah.
They're just tools. So now we're gonna get away from the Jedi and the Sith. So do you have a favorite smuggler and why? Like why would they be?
Outside of Han Solo, probably Dash Rendar. And
Okay.
the reason for Dash Rendar being my favorite like smuggler type character is because of the novel Shadow Games by Michael Reeves and Maya Catherine Bonart. I don't know how to pronounce her name exactly, but it was called Shadow Games, and it was um, actually, there's a great holiday special connection in that novel as well because Chewie isn't in it, so Han and Dash Rendar team up, and
Yeah.
Chewie's explained as being absent because he's with Mala for the birth of Lumpy. It
Hmm.
is mentioned in the story, which I just say what you want about the holiday special. I personally enjoy it, and I love when the EU references it because the EU could have shied away, shunned it, pretended it didn't exist, but instead it embraced it and referenced it in so many places, and I just think that's cool.
Yeah.
But back to Dash Rendar. Dash Rendar is so interesting in Shadow Games. He's an okay character in Shadows of the Empire, but he's unfortunately underutilized. But Shadow Games really made him an interesting character as he's trying to protect this actress over time. And the actress isn't being completely straight with him about all that's going on. But
Hmm.
then it's a similar way to how Han falls for Leia, with Dash Rendar falling for this hollow star that he's hired to protect as
Okay.
it's going along. And it's a thriller style book, and Dash Rendar is so good. He has so many moments to shine in Shadow Games, and he just really comes into his own as a great character there.
Yeah.
Oh, but I forgot Vilmar Grark from the Republic comics. He's
Oh,
absolutely fantastic,
that's
which
right.
Star Wars Timeline just talked about.
Hmm. Yeah, Billy.
Yeah,
And Mr. Billy. He was
yeah,
such a great character there too, because he
yeah.
offered a lot towards the story as well with his character, his attitude, how he responded to everybody, all of that, and his relationship with Voss. So
Yeah,
very good.
and the
Yeah.
best Billy story is definitely the one where he retells the Stark Hyperspace War from his point of view. It's just so funny how he like glorifies himself throughout it. It's amazing. His first appearance, interestingly, wasn't from the Republic comics. It's from a
Hmm.
Tales comic called
Hmm.
Deal with the Demon, and he
Yeah.
was the demon in that
Mhm.
story, and he was like trying to protect this fish people in the story, and he was
Mhm.
considered to be the demon, and then they took him and used him in Stark Hyperspace War in the rest of the Republic comics, and that dynamic that you mentioned with him and Quinlan Vos is so good.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So now we're going to go into, do you have a favorite super weapon and why? Since, we know about the Ma, we know about
Yeah,
Natasha Dalla, and she was set there to oversee all these projects and stuff like that. So do you have a favorite super weapon and why?
I think it's hard to say that one's better than the Death Star,
Hmm.
um, but Center Point Station is really cool, and I like
Yeah.
how it's utilized. It's one of the few super weapons that I don't. It wasn't designed by the Empire.
No, it's
Um,
designed by the Celestials. They had
yeah,
the kids design it. Yeah.
and that was to guard Abeloth, right, to make sure that she's safe.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
one that was yeah, there was one that was in the Corellian sector, and then there was one there in the Maw, and that
yeah,
was the one that imprisoned her. Yeah, so that
yeah.
she wouldn't leave. Yes.
I thought it was really interesting too how it was like how the New Republic was like, we have a super weapon on hand. Should we use it against the Yuzon Fong? And like it was great in the Corellian trilogy. It was absolutely terrific. But then the way that they took that storyline and then made it, should we use Center Point Station against the Yuzon Vong in New Jedi Order? I just love how New Jedi Order took everything Bantam did and just
Yeah.
expanded upon it, used those concepts, and arguably made it even better.
Yeah. Great, like I said, great continuity, and like when you read through that, like sometimes you rediscover something later on after you reread, and
Yeah,
I agree. It was amazing, and it was refreshing for them after book publishing companies changed for Lucasfilm, that they still kept in tandem with what came before, because they could have totally ignored it, which probably would have pissed off
yeah,
fans. Probably would have pissed us off. But we know that from history, from overseeing the fans and seeing the response to the Thrawn trilogy and even Dark Empire and all those that kind of did more groundbreaking work on the EU, they're like, oh, this is what the fans want. They want a better continuity. They want a history. They don't want, these reboots of these stories every now and then, like some franchises do. They want everything to be in tandem with each other, a
yeah,
history. And so I think that's what kept the fans interested, and probably what turned off a lot of us once the company was sold, sad to say. Um, so um I already asked that question. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you a quiz, and then we're gonna start wrapping up here since we're coming up on 2 hours. I like to keep it within 2 hours. Um, just nice cozy area there that I found that works better. So what was Quinlan trained as? So like how we have the counselor, we have the guardian, and we have the sentinel. What was he trained as? What was
Hmm. I think he was trained to be a sentinel, wasn't he?
No, that's what I got wrong too when I was looking further into that, because that's what his character seems like to be. Sentinels go off on their own. They patrol. They report
Yeah,
back. He was trained as a guardian.
a guardian. Okay, well that makes sense because Thom was a guardian too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The way that he was a watchman. So I guess
Hmm.
that makes sense. But then he almost like, even though he was trained as that, he like fulfilled the role of a sentinel later, anyways, with like
Yeah.
how you said going off. That's
Hmm.
interesting though. I didn't ever think about that.
Yeah, because I always, and I've talked about this before, and then when I was doing my research, I'm like, oh shit, I was wrong with this too. He's not a sentinel, but when you look at his character, how he goes undercover and he kind of disappears a
Yeah.
little bit from the order, that's what sentinels do.
Mm. Yeah.
And they go undercover, it's almost like they're spies in a sense, and they're
Yeah.
and collecting information and stuff like that. No, he's a guardian. So I was like, holy crap, okay, I learned something there too. I always thought he
And
was a sentinel.
I guess it does add up since Thom's a guardian that like the
Mhm,
master would train their apprentice to fulfill a similar role since that's
mhm.
their area of expertise. I guess that does make sense actually.
Yeah, because not the color of the saber doesn't designate two. We've
Yeah.
learned that already. But those are the common colors: green, guardian; yellow, sentinel; blue, counselor.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, okay, well, I see him more as a sentinel. Maybe he did take on sentinel role, but again, his background guardian because of Thom. So boom, we know something. More of a guardian, yes. But yeah, like I said, you can see him as a sentinel for going undercover and stuff like that. Yeah. So is there
The
anything
only
else? Go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say the only role he definitely doesn't fill is counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Quinlan Vos. I think he could be guardian or sentinel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like fulfill the roles as a master.
Yeah.
But counselor was definitely not Quinlan Vos's expertise.
Yes, definitely not. Definitely not. And then here's Soul Assassins all Sentinel. That's what I got to. And when we reviewed the Republic Comics chat or coffee chat like a year or two ago, I was like, he's a sentinel because this like his characters and how he's going undercover to try to defeat the Sith within and stuff like that. That to me was more of a sentinel thing. But then when you look at it more, you're like, okay, all right. So, and maybe there is some attributes between the two, or maybe you could still pursue something. Who knows? Who knows?
Mm.
But that's a very interesting thing to look at and to kind of like dissect a little more. It's like, okay, you know, that's pretty interesting. Is there anything else you would like to share about your experience and love of Star Wars before we start closing out?
Um, let's see. I've I think that the EU is so great because it's encouraged me to spend a lot of my time on the expanded universe. And
Hmm.
actually, through the expanded universe, I've gotten to make friends with people that I wouldn't have known otherwise. Like
Yeah.
Marcel was here in the chat, and Alex. I talk to those guys on a daily basis.
Nice.
So and getting to know them has gone beyond the EU, but it's because of the EU that I was able to meet so many great people.
Hmm.
Because there's so many great people in the EU fan base, and I just think it's so cool that the EU is able to connect people together. And I think that it's been awesome that the EU's been something that I could spend my time doing. Like
Yeah.
right now, I'm working on a complete chronological timeline list of all the short stories and the books and the comics and the video games and the web comics and the in-universe stuff and all of that. And it's been so fun to try to catalog it. It's
Mhm.
been very difficult and challenging just because of how expansive the EU is, but it's
Yeah.
been so fun to just kind of track it, and I just love how expansive it is. I don't know, it's just so great, and
Are
I'm
you
glad that I was able to discover it.
Nice. Are you going to publish that to the expandeduniverse.com once you finish the project? Or is there a way that we can
You can
recommend people
it
like here's the other stories in chronological order if you want to go ahead and explore those, if you can find them, resources, all of that.
Yeah, so currently I did my 1.0 and finished it from 2019 to 2022. I finished it in October of last year, and I hadn't
Okay.
posted it anywhere. But now I've been working on the 2.0 and adding in lots of things I missed the first time around. I was shocked by just how many things I'd overlooked
Wow.
because of how expensive it is. But there's currently a Google Doc of it so that you can see like the progress I'm making on it. For
Hmm.
2.0, I've made it through to Jedi Apprentice, and I've been working on it since November of last year. And I've only hit Jedi Apprentice now. Um, and you can see it on a Google Doc that's linked on my YouTube community page. But eventually, I'm going to try to put it on Amazon so that you could print it out and get a copy of it.
Okay.
It's like an unofficial timeline. Um,
Okay.
Disney might try to take it down, but I'm going to try to go for the route of that. I know someone named Trevor Davey did something similar with the timeline they created.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen similar timelines here and there, and it's like that's a task. That is a task, and I commend you for that. Like you're like, I'm going 2.0 now because I missed things, or maybe I need to rearrange something here or there because I missed something, and it kind of changes it up a little tiny bit. So that is a task in itself, and thank you so much for doing that. And once you have that all down, I would love to share that because I'm always recommending stuff to people, where to start, and then also those offshoot stories that we got in the insiders before, the short stories, all of that,
Yeah,
how to find them, where, and all of that. I mean, because sometimes those stories do, well, they do tie in. It gives you a little bit more perspective of what's going on between
yeah.
novels in a sense. Very amazing. Just like that one about Jaina and Jag, and I forget the name of it, but it's right after Crucible, and they're going off on a mission together.
It's called Kerfeli. Is that Kerfelian Interlude? Was that the title of
I
their
think
story, or
so.
was
It's
that?
by Christy Golden, I believe.
Yeah, and it
Okay.
was an insider story, right?
Yes.
Or was it? Or was it one of? Because Del Rey published some Valentine's Day stories and did
Hmm.
one about Luke and Mara by Timothy Zahn. And then
Hmm.
Troy Denning did one about Luke and Leia, or
Yeah.
not Luke and Leia, Han and Leia,
And I'm like, yeah.
and and it was available on their publishing website. So I don't know if Christy Golden's was like that or if it was Insider. I'm forgetting.
Yeah, it was like their honeymoon, and they were going off on
Yeah,
to locate something as well. So still a slash honeymoon type mission kind of deal. So it was like right after
yeah,
their wedding and stuff. Yeah. So that's, like I said, great resources to find because these little short stories will give you a little bit more character development, a little bit of more insight
yeah.
what's going on. And it does for Jaina and Jagged, for example. Yeah. So, and you just got done doing March Madness for Expanded Universe, right? So tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that before we close here, too.
It was super fun. I was honored to be a part of it. Matt's got so much fun energy for that.
Yes.
Uh,
Agree.
Marcel is so funny on that. Meg's insights and her surprise Meg reviews when there were upsets was always great to see. We had so much fun doing it. I think we all had fun doing it. And afterwards, we talked for like up to 2 hours afterwards just about the EU, and it was just such a fun thing to be a part of. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to Matt for letting me be a part of that.
Yeah. And Brennan has also contributed to the expandeduniverse.com website as well. So find his publications there. Open airlock policy, or Tim is another one. I got invited. I just don't have time to sit down and contribute right now. So I haven't done it yet. Although I do want to, because it's always good to have multiple people coming in with different perspectives and
Mhm.
different interests and stuff like that, and different spin-offs on how to share the lore and what have you. So very good website as well, expandeduniverse.com. So if you guys could check that out and support as well. And what do you have anything coming up for your channel?
I'm streaming tomorrow about some covers, the Essential Legends covers. We're
Okay.
comparing them to the original covers, and
Ah,
then I have a panel of six of us, and we'll be saying which we prefer. I typically prefer the original cover, but there's usually one Essential Legends cover where I'm like, that one's better. Like with Darth Bane Rule of Two,
I agree.
for example. That's like one of the only ones where it's like better. So
Hmm.
we're going to be comparing and contrasting that tomorrow. I'm recording. Let's see. I've always liked to have guests on the channel. I'm doing recording with Surfer Eddie, Surfer
Yeah,
76 tomorrow. In the
nice.
next couple weeks, I'm doing something with Noah. Um, Alex and I have a podcast that's going on the expandinguniverse.com. We have
Mhm,
guests on that, like Only Good Games, The Revanchist, Matt Wilkins, Stevie B,
mhm.
lots of great people. I really like using a platform to get other people's opinions out there through
Yeah.
it. Because when I first came into the EU fandom, it was Callum Johns and Magneto Alex were the only two people who had me on streams for the first time. I was just like, my voice was super high. I was like 13, had no idea what I was doing. I'd disconnect multiple times from the streams because I was doing it on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Um, and I was really grateful that they gave me a chance to share my opinions. And so whenever I can, I like to get as many people as possible to come on my channel and share what they like or didn't like about the EU because I think hearing all of our perspectives and kind of unifying us as as a fandom, a small
Yeah.
fandom, but the EU community can be strong. And we're all together, getting to be unified, getting to go on streams together, share our thoughts. I think it's absolutely great, and so I try to do that as much as possible on my channel.
Thank you so much for that because like we all like when we comes to the expanded universe, the lore and stuff, no matter what our niche is, our platform is for our channel, the main vision is getting the EU in front of people
Yeah,
and continuing to share the love, helping people refine their way back or find their way in. So
yeah,
you guys go ahead and if you haven't had a chance to, please subscribe to Brennan's channel here. Support. Um, Again, all of us have our own journeys have our own perspective and what characters we like, don't like, and that's what makes it very unique. Even when we don't agree on something, that's fine because it would be a boring place if we all agreed on everything, you
yeah,
know. And Star Wars wouldn't expand the way it did if we all agreed. Like even the authors, you know, if they didn't, you know, expand on the story bit that they're told to write in, you know, and stuff like that. So, you know, having a vast voice, sharing the love of the EU, the commonality of it is a beautiful thing. So go subscribe, go support, go check out the expandinguniverse.com, get involved there, share their stories, you know, continue to ask questions with all of us, like where to start or what do you recommend? Or is there any stories I like this character that I'm missing? You know, all of that beautiful stuff. And thank you again for allowing me to interview you. This is the purpose of my Talking EU, is putting the EU enthusiasts or the EU people, the ones that are sharing, even if you're just beginning, in front to have a conversation with on how you got started and why you're continuing and what you love about it, everything in between. So thank you so much again. And thank you, chat, for tuning in. Thank you guys for the continued support as well. And my name is Alora Baga. OG Star Wars is my channel. My platform is about George Lucas. I do compare and contrast, between the lores and carrying on the rich history as well and having fun with it. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I will chat with you later, and may the force be with you.
Another happy landing.